Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar for today, your resume, cover letters, and LinkedIn profile. I'm Christine Valenza-Shin. I'm class of '84 and the alumni counselor here at Barnard Career Development. Take a second to say hello so that I know you're out there and you can hear me. You can either use the question box or the chat box on your feature there, your GoToWebinar feature. I want to welcome those of you who are here for the first time, and as well as those who participated last week. Just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded, and my voice only will be recorded. You all are muted and can ask questions only in writing, which I'll repeat. And just a note that there's actually quite a lot of content in today's webinar, so I'll only be stopping a few times to answer questions. I'll keep an eye on what's coming in to make sure there aren't any particular problems, but otherwise know that I'll get to your questions at the end of each section. So, okay, I at first didn't see any questions, but now I see that people are here. Excellent. So let's get started with your resume, cover letters, and LinkedIn profile, crafting them with power and impact. So we're going to start with just an overview of what we're doing today. Together, they are these three items are the tools you use to present yourself effectively throughout your job search. We're going to, for each one of them, look at some do's and don'ts, look at some examples, and answer some frequently asked questions. And then if I haven't covered them already, any individual questions you might have. So let's start with the resume. And we will start with a question. I'm going to launch a poll. Give me 1 second to do that. Okay. First question, what is the purpose of a resume? Take a stab. Tell me what you think is the purpose of a resume. %45 of you have voted. Let me wait for a few more and then I'll start sharing results. So 9% of you have chosen to get a job as the answer, 45% to serve as a record of your work experience, 42 to get an interview, and 0 to stress you out. D, stress you out is probably very true, but it's not the purpose. So the answer actually is C for the following reason. Hold on, let me go back in here. Okay. Obviously, part of what a resume does is shows a record of your work experience, but it's important to realize it's not an official record with every detail written down on it. And in fact, in today's working world, the resume is a summary of important and significant things. We'll look at that in a moment. But the key to keep in mind as we look, we're looking at resumes and cover letters as in a very functional way. Your goal in submitting them is to get an interview. And so whether you're handing it to someone in a networking situation or you're sending it or uploading it online, your goal is to get to that next step and get invited for an interview. So we'll keep that in mind. I'm going to close this poll and I'm going to ask you another question. Here's the question on the, about how long does a prospective employer initially spend reading your resume? About how long does a prospective employer initially spend reading your resume? And the answer is, as 79% of you correctly answered, 30 seconds or less. Now, it's important to keep in mind, this is the initially spend reading your resume. So what you have to picture is somebody in HR or somebody in the department that's doing the hiring with a huge pile of resumes. Could be a physical pile, more likely nowadays it's a series of resumes electronically in front of them on their computer, and they are skimming to look for people who are a good fit. Once they've narrowed down that initial pile, then they do look more closely and take a little bit longer. But tying this back to our first poll question, if you want to get an interview, you need to design a resume and a cover letter that can be looked at clearly and quickly and get their attention, make it clear that you're a good possible fit for this position. And so that's what we're going to take a look at as we delve a little bit more into how to frame your resume. Some basic do's. Actually, let me close that poll. Good. Okay. So some resume do's. You want to make it achievement rather than task focused. And this goes back to my initial question. This is not a record of everything you've ever done and within each job, everything you've done within each job. That's a trap that people can fall into. You want to focus more on achievements rather than the tasks. And we'll look at some examples of how to do that a little bit later. You want to quantify and identify scope where possible. So what this means is if you can work in numbers where appropriate to clearly describe your accomplishments, that's great. So the example here is manage a team of 9 sales reps or edit a monthly newspaper with a circulation of 5,000. So numbers are not just for people who work in sales or work in marketing or analytics. Numbers are for everyone if you can do it in a smooth way. You don't want to add them just to add them, but the idea here is where you can give a little bit more indication of scope. That's helpful, and it shows, again, this more achievement rather than task focused. You didn't just write the newsletter, you got it out every week and you got it out to this many people. You want to edit your resume to include the most relevant and significant elements in a single or 2-page document. So you can't put everything on. And one thing you want to keep an eye on is what's most relevant and significant, keeping in mind, of course, that you do have to show a clear, steady record of employment. And if there are gaps, they need to be either identified or addressed briefly in the cover letter, which we'll come to later, right? But this is one of the, I think, most important things to understand about the resume is you're going to highlight things that are most relevant to what you're applying to. You want to stick to a basic, clear format that helps the reader glean information quickly and with minimal effort. That goes back to our 32nd point. You want to make your resume a document that focuses on your accomplishments and skills. Sort of related to the first one, but the idea is, one of the ways I heard of describing is don't describe your day-to-day work, but that single day when you accomplish something major. And this can be accomplishments. They don't have to be huge. You don't have to have revolutionized something, but this could be, did you do something new? Did you improve something? What did you accomplish? How did you make things better for your team, your organization, your company? You want to begin each achievement statement with an active verb, right? Plan and execute monthly donor events or analyzed customer interaction for monthly report. Again, these achievements are not huge, but basically you're not just describing what you did, but giving a clear, direct picture. And you want to use the active voice with verbs that indicate you're in charge. Represented firm at international symposium. One thing we often work with our students and younger alumni with is if you're an assistant, if you're an intern, it's written into those titles. People understand that an intern is not in charge solely. People understand that an assistant is working with other people. So it's okay for your bullet to reflect you in the driver's seat. People will take that as you mean it, which is you are in the driver's seat for this particular thing with help, with supervision. Okay. Great. Some resume don'ts. Don't use vague qualitative terms such as large or many, which leave the reader with questions about specifics. You can't always put a number to things, but sometimes you could put an estimate, or you can find a more specific way to identify number or scope. Don't try to differentiate yourself with an unconventional format or tactics such as graphics and colored paper unless you're applying for jobs in arts related fields, which will value that. Another example of this could be in some newer, more innovative tech or startup firms. You can often tell by the job description that they do welcome sort of out of the box and creative approaches. That would be another exception. But in general, you want to, when you're applying in traditional fields in a traditional manner, you want to keep your resume not all fancied up. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't use some good formatting techniques and you can't highlight certain things, but it needs to be clear and not too untraditional if you're applying in a traditional sort of field. You don't routinely include reasons for leaving your job, salary information, or references on your resume. Sometimes places ask for that, and that's fine. Often resumes or CVs for graduate school ask for these very specific things about salary or how many hours you worked, etc. But generally, you leave that information out and you wait to be asked about that in an interview if it comes up at all. And a very common phrase for some of us alumni from the 80s, 70s and 80s, you used to, on resumes, put references available upon request. You don't even need to take the space to do that. That's just assumed. If they're interested in you, if they bring you in for an interview, they will ask you for references at that point, or sometimes earlier. You don't need to make distinctions between full or part-time work or paid or unpaid work. Right? And this is really helpful for those of you who maybe have a gap or who've been out of the workforce, running your own company or working in, taking care of family. This allows you to keep current activities on the resume, even when you're not employed full time. So maybe you've been working part-time in a family business. Maybe you have been doing a lot of volunteer work. You don't need to label it as such on your resume as long as you're putting professional experience or experience. If you label it work experience, that implies you are paid for it. So you would instead label your section professional experience or work or just plain experience, and describe your role. And then you're not trying to hide anything. Absolutely, if it comes up in an interview, you can identify it as a volunteer position. But again, our goal is to get the interview, and putting too much extraneous information or making it clear that everything you've done has been on a voluntary basis, it gives them grounds for rejecting your resume. We don't want that. We want them to be looking at what you actually did, what are the skills and experiences you have, so that they're interested in bringing you in for that interview. Don't try to portray yourself as a jack of all trades in the hope that something will fill the employer's needs. You want to make your resume strategically focused for the field you are applying to. And this isn't to say that you have to necessarily apply just within one field. I often, work with young alumni who are genuinely considering several different options, would be happy to work in several different positions, different types of organizations and companies, but you don't want to try and cover all that in a single resume. And so what you'll end up with is sort of resumes that are focused on a particular role, particular industry. And that's where the strategy is. But you don't just say, hey, I could do anything. That does not tend to be attractive to employers. They want a more focused presentation of why you would be good for this job, this field, this company. And never use your current work email or phone number as contact information. That's just maybe perhaps stating the obvious, but never hurts. It's an indication that you're job searching on your current employer's time, and no prospective employer wants to see that. So if you don't want to use a personal email for this, a job hunt is a good time to establish what I call sort of a personal professional email. Nothing, doesn't have to be anything fancy, but you can create a separate email account for your job hunt and job communication if you would like to. Okay. So one thing we recommend here at Barnard Career Development is that you have a master resume and then application resumes. So the master resume is a comprehensive version, and it's for your eyes only, or possibly my eyes if you're getting some advice. And it's basically going to be a list of any and all work and volunteer experiences. Doesn't matter how many pages it is. The formatting isn't essential unless, it's for you to make sure you have everything in one place. and you can label it that. And then anytime you get a new job or you remember something you used to do or you join a new organization, throw it on that master resume. It's there, it's waiting for you. Then application resumes are the public resumes. These are the ones you're going to customize for each job. By customize, I don't mean completely rewrite it, but you're going to tweak it. You're going to use keywords and phrases from the job description. You're going to choose and order your bullets that most closely match the job description. And then you're going to develop an effective labeling and filing system. I want to go back to the first 2 points. They're using keywords and phrases from the job description. So again, we want to tweak rather than completely rewrite. So if you're looking at the job description and they keep repeating a certain phrase, maybe they call it multitasking, and you don't have multitasking on your resume, but you have something similar to it, go ahead and steal their phrase. It's clearly important to them, and work it into one of your bullets is what I'm suggesting. And then on the second one there, choose and order bullets that most closely match the job description. So let's say you've got a job listed where you were working at a nonprofit, and on your master resume, you've got 10 bullet points because you did 10 different things for that nonprofit. On your application resume, you would look down that list of 10 and pick, say, the 3 or 4 that most closely match what the job description says they're looking for, and you hone in on those. Or it may be that you had some budgeting responsibility. You tend to put it 3rd or 4th because it wasn't a huge part of your job. But in reading the job description, you see that they're very interested in someone who can manage a budget. So then you might pop that budgeting experience up to bullet number 1, bullet number 2. So that's what I mean about the tweaking. So in other words, you're not starting from scratch every time you write a resume. You're simply adapting and making sure that you're tailoring your resume in small but crucial ways to the actual job description that you're applying to. On the effective labeling filing system, based on my experience, a lot of people tend to just date their resumes, but then it's hard for them to find. So often the simplest filing system is to simply put your last name, first name, company. And that way, let's say you applied to a position at Google, and then 6 months later, you're applying for a position at Facebook. And so you're like, oh, this job description reminds me of the Google job description. Let me pull that one up. And so then you tweak the Google one, change all the, change what you need to change, and then you save the new one as Facebook, your name. That's good for submitting to the company, and it's good for your filing system so that you can find it. All right, we're going to take a look at some sample resumes. I'm going to try and keep that brief, and then we'll come back and talk about cover letters. So we're going to take a little tour of my desktop. Here we go. So these are some samples from our website. They're a little bit in need of freshening up, and I will try and get to that soon. But for now, we'll work on some basic principles. This is up as our young alumnus sample. All right. We've got a clear, fairly traditional presentation, sans serif, nice clean font. She's got her education listed first. We'll talk about that a little bit. Mostly focused on Barnard, and then she identifies that she did a year or a semester abroad, or a summer abroad. And then we've got experience. Okay, so we're looking at the formatting is key. So she capitalizes and bolds the name of the organization or company, and then she's italicizing her title. And everything else is regular. She's using a bullet system as opposed to a paragraph system. And let's just look at her verbs. Build, coordinate, reached, rewarded, networked, developed, selected, analyzed. Clear, direct verbs. She quantifies, right? Reach sales tiers of 250,000. Rewarded with merit raise. Okay. Networked with and solicited select parents for inaugural Barnard student career dinner. That it could be interesting to get some numbers on that potentially, but she adds numbers down here. Not everything has to be quantified. Okay. All right. She identifies herself as an intern, right? Focused on press coverage, right? And then she has a skills section, which typically you address your language skills, your your language skills, your computer skills, anything specific to the industry you're looking at. She's looking at fashion, right? And then one thing that's notable is she has organizations and activities, and here she just went with a list function, and that's because she's a a young alumna. She's only been out a year or two at the point this resume was written. So these are some of her activities. She doesn't have to give full details. She might have had them under experience earlier and bulleted them out, but now she's trying to save space and just listing them. And certainly somebody taking a look at this resume, if they're interviewing her, can ask for more information, but you don't have to bullet out everything you've done. Okay. And then let's just take a look at a more experienced resume. Okay, still sans serif. That doesn't mean you have to go sans serif. Times, there actually was a funny article about Times New Roman. Is it too stodgy in today's job market? Opinions were mixed, so make your own choice. So again, we have the name is bigger, and that's pretty typical. You want to make your name a couple of font sizes larger than the rest of it. Sometimes people do all caps. Sometimes they offset it in some ways. And this is a great way of saving space, is to separate your contact information with these dots rather than listing it all on 4 separate lines. We'll talk about this more in a moment, but Leah introduces a summary of qualifications, all right, at the top, which is exactly what it says. It's sort of a summary. It's a way to condense some of the information she wants to convey in her resume. And then she lists her professional experience, right? Again, we look at the formatting. She's using bold and italics. It's not the only way to go. You just need to be consistent, okay? What I think is interesting about the way this resume lays out the information, these are sort of composites, not really a single person. She uses this italics section to give an overall description and then focuses in on accomplishments. And that's an interesting way of doing it. So that way you've explained a little bit about what the company does, what you do within the company, and then you jump in here. Her verbs are okay, but repetitive. So I would definitely mix these up a little more. Enable to programs, enable to startup. But again, you see that achievement focus. What did she change? What did she introduce? What did she create? Okay. And she's quantifying where she can, right? Add services at 3 sites, 18 months, right? So very focused, very clear. Okay, same thing here. She takes this opportunity to describe the place and her role, okay, and then focuses in on achievements, right? Her education comes down at the bottom, all right, because she's been out longer, and she left her dates off, which we'll talk about in a moment, okay? That question almost always comes up. All right, so let's go back to the presentation. All right, and great. Okay, so we saw some examples of, I didn't show you an example of this, but one thing you can do on a resume is to divide your experience by field. You don't have to do a strict reverse chronological format. So for instance, if you are returning to an earlier field, that you could list your education experience or your journalism experience first, even though the dates are old, but you do reverse chronological within that section. And that can allow you to present the most relevant experience first. Do you list the position or the company first? I think in both our cases, both our samples, they did the company first and then the position. But if your titles are very impressive, you could list the title first. If the company is very well known or sounds really cool, you can list that first. It doesn't really matter which you go with, but you need to be consistent. I think it's more typical to start with the company than the title, but some people do reverse it. Right. And then, as I pointed out on our young alumnus sample, condensing your volunteer and leadership positions or earlier work experiences can save space or de-emphasize the prior field. So again, in that sample, let's say that you do have a lot of background in journalism, but you're not applying for a journalism position. You need to acknowledge that as part of your work history, but you don't have to bullet out every single job. It just gives them a sense of like, oh, okay, she did this before, but now she's doing this, and here's the kind of thing she's applying for. Okay. All right. And then quickly, we want to look at the summary of qualifications or headline. This is an optional feature. And at the top of a resume. It's an effective place to customize your resume to a particular job description. So back when I was saying don't rewrite your resume every single time, just tweak it, this is a really easy place to tweak. So if you, again, see in the job description that they use certain words and phrases, you can work those into your summary. You can use a paragraph style, you can use bullet points, or both. It's kind of up to you. This can be, a summary of qualifications can be particularly helpful if you're changing to a new field or if you have a diverse work history. You've done a variety of different things and you want to sort of tie them together before people start looking at the specific jobs you've held. Okay. So here's a little guideline. I'm not going to take a ton of time on this. I adapted this from a great website called Susan Ireland. So you'll see the note down at the bottom. She's got lots of samples, lots of tips, and I think most of her material is free. There might be a portal to more paid advice, etc. But she has a great sort of workbook for how you can do this. How do you put together a summary of qualifications? So for instance, you might ask yourself, how much experience do I have in this profession, in this field, or using the required skills? A spoken answer, someone saying in the field of financial management might write, I've worked as a financial manager for a mid-sized company for the last 14 years. And then we want to translate that into resume speak. Drop the I and say 14 years as the financial manager of a company with current sales of 75 million. So you're basically, what you're trying to do here is sort of tap into sort of a more, okay, what did I do? How do I say it? Just get it out verbally. And then you can, once you've jotted that down or said it out loud, you can then translate it to resume speak. And she uses the same pattern for a couple other. How is success measured in the position mentioned in your statement? How do you measure up? Okay. Software developer wishing to make a move into technical writing. Resume speak, reputation for writing clear and concise explanations for technical and non-technical users. Okay. And then finally, what personal commitments or passions do you have that would be valued by the employer? All right. And skipping to resume speak, strong commitment to preserving nature through education about environmental hazards. Okay, so this is just a little guide. As I said, you can check out susanireland.com for further information, or you can just Google summary of qualifications. And you also could work with me or another counselor or another friend or advisor on putting something like this together. Okay, quickly, some resume FAQs. 1 page or 2. 1 page is ideal, especially earlier in your career. Roughly 7 to 10 years of experience and beyond, you could go to 2 pages. This really varies, though. It kind of depends on how many jobs you've had and have they all been in the same field. So, but yeah, you don't. But the key thing here is that if you have only been out of college for a couple of years, you do not want to go with the 2-page resume. That's very off-putting, not to all employers, but to a lot of them. They're like, hey, she just graduated 2 years ago. What could she possibly have to put here? And that goes to our editing and highlighting system. Should education be listed before or after work experience? For the most part, for most of your career, you'll put it after, but recent graduates do often lead with education. And that can be both graduating from college, and then if you go back to grad school, often you will pop the education section back up after grad school because you've got a new qualification, and that's the main thing you're sort of trying to capitalize on. But in general, once you've been out a year or two and you have other experience, you would lead with experience, drop the education down. And the thing I always assure people of, because you went to a great school, in a great university, so everybody always wants to put it up at the top, but people always will check where you went to school. So that Barnard Columbia imprint will make its good impression, whether you put it at the top or not. Can I include just email and phone number when submitting my resume online? Yes, this has become accepted practice, mostly for privacy reasons as everything's gone digital, but it can also protect you from address prejudice, which sounds odd, but you could have somebody who doesn't want someone commuting because all their workers from New Jersey keep getting stuck on snow days. You could have people making assumptions about where you live. If you're, in certain towns in Westchester, do you even need a job? It sounds ridiculous, but again, you don't want to give whoever's going through the resumes any reason to reject you. And of course, if you're applying for an out-of-town position, this can be helpful as well. They're looking at your resume without making a judgment about where you are and whether you're moving to their city. Okay. Should you submit your resume as a PDF or a Word document? The answer is PDF because it preserves your formatting. That's the main reason is, you know, when Word documents get opened by different systems, it can mess up how your bullets look and how many pages you are. So PDF is the way to go. All right. I'm going to stop and see if there's any quick questions. Otherwise, I'll move on. Okay, so far I just see your hellos. Good. Okay, so, oops, there's one. A number of online let me see if I can bring this up bigger. A number of online applications have specifically requested Word documents in my job hunt this time round. Always good to go with what they say. Oh, yeah, that's an excellent point. I don't love that they're asking for Word documents, because another factor in this is that that opens you up to having things changed around, although I don't know why they do that. But yes, absolutely. If they ask for specifics, you always want to follow the rules. And of course, we're in this transition where more and more places are using online applications. Sometimes that means filling out and cutting and pasting. Sometimes there's a way of uploading your resume, your cover letter. And that often negates the address advice because you have to put it's a required field in a lot of these places. So, but there still are some old-fashioned places that just ask for a cover letter and resume attached to an email. So good. That's a good point. What was question? Oh, the question was, a number of online applications have specifically requested Word documents in my job hunt this time around. Always good to go with what they say. So it was actually more a piece of advice than a question. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on, but I will come back for further questions. So hold that thought or write it down and I'll circle back. Okay. Let's talk about cover letters. Cover letters serve as a bridge between the job description and your resume. They also can frame how you want your resume to be viewed. And they can be used to address concisely and positively perceived or real weaknesses in your work history. So, for instance, I get a lot of questions about if there's a gap or if you've had a couple of short-term jobs. If you choose to include the gap or the jumping around on your resume, sometimes I can help you find a way around it or a different way to present it so it's not as obvious. But if there's no way around it and you might have something that will raise a red flag for an employer, your cover letter can be a way to succinctly address it so that they know you're aware of it and they get an explanation of it, and hopefully that keeps them from being confused or concerned. Some cover letter do's. You definitely want to keep a cover letter to one page. The exception is if I have seen people apply for something. Most recently, last year, I had an alumna apply to be a rabbi, and they called it a cover letter, but really what they wanted was sort of a personal statement, and it ended up being, 8 or 10 pages long, and they basically required that. So that's the only exception. Otherwise, if it says cover letter, you want to keep it short. Okay. You want to use clear, concise, and direct language. You absolutely want to use keywords and phrases from the job description. Now, sometimes my good Barnard writers out there bristle at this, but this goes back to our original point that you're trying to get an interview. And the way you get an interview is to show them in 30 seconds or less initially that you're a good fit for the job. And the way you show that you're a good fit for the job is you integrate their keywords and phrases into your cover letter so that they can easily see. And I should mention at this point that some companies and organizations are using word search software as their first line of narrowing down resumes. So they literally load in their keywords and phrases, and then they load in your cover letter and resume, and whoever has the highest number of matches become, say, the first 20 they look at, or the only 20 they look at. So, so you still need to be a good writer. You need to take those keywords and phrases and integrate them into your prose in an effective way, but you need to do it. You want to use specific examples from your past experience of the skills and attributes you're focusing on. So you're going to choose 1, 2, or 3 key things from the job description, look through your resume for examples of that, and focus in on that. And you absolutely need to get the cover letter right. If they do ask for a cover letter, not everyone does anymore. You want to make sure if you do one to do it right. no errors, especially spelling errors and especially basic facts about the company or organization. And I have seen resumes that refer to Barnard as Barnard University. That's basic information, or referring to there being male students at Barnard. It takes about 2 seconds on our website to figure out what we're called and what our mission is. So similarly, when you're applying other places, you want to pay attention to that and make sure that you're not making factual errors. Okay. This is one way of approaching a cover letter. It's not the only way, but it's a good starting point, especially for those of you who haven't done one in a while or aren't happy with your current model. Your first paragraph is an introduction. You want to start with the position you're applying for, where you saw it posted, and then a very brief sentence or two on why you're applying. And one way of approaching this is to mention a key attribute or mission of the company or organization, and that you'll bring needed skills and knowledge to the team making that happen. So just using Barnard as an example, Barnard's commitment to excellence in education to women is important to me, and my communication skills, or whatever you're applying for, I want to be part of the team that's making that happen and bringing more young women to college, or et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Second paragraph, this is a body paragraph. You want to choose one or two key responsibilities listed in the job description that are a good match for your resume. So you may have noticed, if you've been looking at job descriptions, that traditional job descriptions usually start with a list of what your key responsibilities are going to be in that position, and then a list of key qualifications. So one suggestion I have is to take one paragraph to look at responsibilities, one paragraph to look at qualifications. So look down that list. What seems really important to them? Do they repeat something a lot of times? Are there certain key things at the top of the list that seem important to them? And then you want to look at your resume and say, okay, where am I a good fit? Where do I match up here? And then you give one or two specific examples of when you've performed those responsibilities in past jobs, internships, or volunteer roles. So you're not giving them, again, your whole work history. You're simply pulling out some examples that show, yes, I'm really good at budget supervision, or getting out press releases, or whatever the specific thing is that you're addressing. Okay. Third paragraph, also a body paragraph, same concept, but now you go to their list of qualifications, look at what's a good match for your experience, and give some specific examples. And this is a good place to focus on transferable skills, especially if you're applying for a job in a field that's a shift or a change for you. Often under some of these qualifications might be very specific, but you often find those sort of general good worker qualifications: responsible, on time, a good communicator, sort of things that are transferable skills that cut across many different roles. And this is a good opportunity to focus in on that. And then a fourth paragraph is your conclusion. You want to refer in a fresh way to why you're a good fit for the company or organization. So, you basically could say the same thing you said in the opening paragraph, but use different words or use a different part of their mission or something. And then state what's going to happen next. One way of expressing this is, so what basically you want to happen next is you want them to call you to set up an interview. And the way you can address, you could either say that, I'd love to set up an interview, or I look forward to hearing about an interview. Or if you want to put it a little less clearly, a little less assertively, you could say, I look forward to the opportunity to meet in person to further discuss what I can bring to your team or your organization, which is basically saying, you're going to want to bring me in and talk to me. I just know it. All right. So it's a confident way of saying, I want to see you in person. I can tell you more. Okay. So I think I'm going to wait on the sample cover letters. When I send you the follow-up email, I will send you links to these so you can look at them, but we'll try and get to them at the end, but I just don't want to run out of time on the LinkedIn profile. But one thing you can look for in the sample cover letters is connecting to the mission of the company or organization, vague versus specific examples, and passive versus an active closing. So if we get a chance at the end, I'll definitely take you there. Okay. I think I have a question, so let me see. Okay, sorry, let me get to the right place. Okay. Are cover letters still commonly used? If employers only spend 30 seconds on a resume, how much time is really given on the cover letter? Yeah, it's hard to answer that. They are less common, but if they are asked for, you want to provide a good one. When they are still asked for, it's important to the organization or the person doing the hiring for some reason, and it's seen as part of the package, part of the test. So you want to do a good job. Again, in that initial go through, they might just be skimming, but you still want to put together a good cover letter because, again, if you make it out of that first, if you make it past the first cut, then often they will take more time to read your resume more carefully, read your cover letter more carefully. So yes, if a cover letter is asked for, you want to take time to do it and do it well. But you are right that sometimes they just ask for a resume, in which case your email or some small section on the online application, you give a sort of much shorter version of a cover letter without fleshing it out the way I've talked about. Okay. Do qualifications and responsibilities experience overlap sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said this is just one way of approaching it. And one thing I've noticed is in job descriptions, especially in newer, smaller, more innovative places, but sometimes in big innovative places, the job descriptions are very different. They might be there's a particular style among startups that I've seen a couple people bring in, which is they'll say, we are, and then a list of their qualities, and then you are, and then a list of your qualities. Some of those are very short. I've noticed a trend in a lot of nonprofit job descriptions where it becomes like a 4-page listing of everything they might possibly expect you to do. So it's almost like a legal document. It's a little crazy. So they really vary, and I'm just suggesting one way you can approach it, but absolutely. I mean, the main thing I want to get at is to make sure that you're pulling from the job description, whatever form it is, key things that are a good match for you and making that the focal point for your cover letter. Not just, you don't want to use your cover letter to just reiterate in prose what's already in your resume. You want to use it to kind of hone in on a couple of good points where you're a good match. For resumes, how specific do you need to be regarding the span of time you worked for a job? For example, if you worked 3 months somewhere in an internship or short-term position, do you write the season, the month and year, or just the year? If you did a short-term thing within one calendar year, I think it's a little awkward to put just the year. So I think you can go either with the season or the month and the year. This tends to vary. I'd say when you're a student or a recent graduate, you've had internships that have been short-term. It's more common to use the months. As you become more experienced and maybe drop some of those internships or just put them in a list rather than bulleting them out, then you may have the opportunity to just list the years and drop the months. So the key thing is whatever system you decide to go with, just be consistent throughout. So that's one of the key things I look for when I'm working with someone on their resume is I'll sort of scan down and see, okay, is everything they've done, has it bridged a calendar year? So then we can go to just years, and that actually can cover up some short stints. So let's say you had a job from September of 2014 to March of 2015. If you just put 2014 to 2015, that seems like you stayed there longer than you did. You're not lying, but you're just, again, trying to get that interview, and then you can be completely upfront with them either verbally or in the detailed work history, but it's that first impression. Okay, and good question. Okay. Question on tone. Some new companies have fun job descriptions with a very casual tone. Should I try to use a similar tone to show how I fit in with the company culture, or stick to a professional dry tone just to be safe? I would use a similar tone, but definitely make it you. All right. So your voice, but in a more formal, a less formal way. I think that's the way to go. I think part of what they're trying to get at with their job description is to find people who are going to be a good fit. So I would go with that. Okay. Do you have an example of a resume that shows a gap for taking a year off? I don't at the moment, but I am happy to take a look at yours and give you an idea for that. And I've actually am in the process of trying to collect some sort of more varieties and more samples of resumes. So I will make note of that and address that. There's a couple different ways of doing it. You can simply leave the gap and, just leave a gap without identifying it and then address it briefly in your cover letter. Or some people will put it in as an entry. It gets a little awkward, so it's kind of a case by case type of thing. Okay. All right. So let's take a look. Let me just check my time here. Okay. We are good. We've got 15 minutes left. We're going to take a look at LinkedIn. Actually, I'm just going to skim through this. You will have a chance to look over this when I send you the link to the PowerPoint. Okay. I want to make sure I have enough time on your LinkedIn profile. Okay. So LinkedIn profile, 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, this webinar was just on resumes and cover letters, but now LinkedIn profile is part of the package. So let's take a look. The LinkedIn profile combines facets actually of both cover letters and resumes. It's kind of a 2-in-1 proposition with some other additional features. And your LinkedIn profile is routinely looked at by prospective employers. Not every single one, and some employers do different things with it than others. I even was at a conference recently where recruiters said that they actually look at your LinkedIn profile first. So they look at the name on the resume, Google you, or go to LinkedIn and look at that first, then they look at your resume. So you have no way of controlling that. The only thing you can do is make sure that all three things, LinkedIn profile, resume, cover letter, are all good and all have some consistency among them. Not having a LinkedIn profile can be seen as lacking web and social networking savvy. So it's become mainstream enough and common enough in enough industries that it can be viewed as this. It's, again, not automatic and not 100%, but it's just something to consider if you, even if you haven't joined LinkedIn yet, or if you have sort of a very bare bones profile and haven't really used it much. You need to give some thought to that. It is an opportunity to supplement your resume and cover letter, right? It has elements of both, but it also has some additional sections, which we'll take a look at. Okay. The first part of the LinkedIn profile is your headline and summary. Okay. The first part actually is your name. We'll look at that in a moment. I'm going to show you my profile. Beneath your name and title, they give you an opportunity to write a headline. I forget what the limitation is. It's fairly short. And it can be similar to a headline or professional summary on your resume, but short, a short version of that. And it can be used to indicate a career shift or change. So for instance, if you had been working in PR and now want to be an event planner, and you've got some event planning experience, but it's not your sole professional experience, you can position yourself as an experienced event planner with background in public relations. Lead with what you want to be, but acknowledge what you used to be is one rule of thumb, but there's many variations on this. And then there's a summary, which is an optional feature, but one you can make use of. Think of it as the body paragraphs in your cover letter. And what you want to do is use it to frame how your experience section is viewed. So again, using the shifting careers example, or if you're shifting roles, you'd like to apply for a different type of role, you can write the first paragraph about the new field or the new role, and the second paragraph could be about your former role or your former field. So that's one way of looking at it. So then when they get to your experience section, they can see, oh, she's mostly been doing this, but she is interested in doing this type of thing, and it can make more sense. Okay. All right, and then the experience section is similar to the experience part on LinkedIn is similar to the experience section of your resume. However, LinkedIn forces you into a single reverse chronological listing of your work experience. You don't have any leeway. You can't, for instance, isolate your education experience from your journalism experience or things like that. But you can use bullet or paragraph style in your descriptions. At the moment, there's not a lot of graphic options in LinkedIn, which sometimes frustrates. Like, I don't think they even have bullet points. You can just use dashes. So some people, for that reason, if they don't like the look of dashes, they prefer to do it in a paragraph style. My resume is in bullet points, but in LinkedIn, I use a paragraph style just to kind of mix it up a little, but you have that option. Okay. Oops. Okay. All right, so let's stop for a second, take a look at mine so I can show you some of these features. Then we'll come back and see if I did them. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so here's LinkedIn, and here's my profile. And of course, social media, always so helpful. Every time you log on, they ask you a different question. So do I have certifications? Yes. Have I updated them? No. So, but I'm going to ignore that. All right, so here's my name. Here is my headline. Okay, so many people simply put their occupation. And in some fields, such as law, everybody just puts their title. They don't put anything. But you can do different things with this. So when you're in your profile, when you click on the blue pencil, I'm pretty boring. I just say I'm a career counselor, but it will show me examples. So for instance, you can add multiple rows, or you can add adjectives. So you could say that you're an experienced transportation executive. You don't have to just put your title. Or you could say web designer and information architect. Don't know what that means, but that's interesting. Or you could say you're a visionary entrepreneur and investor. All right. So in other words, your headline, it's up to you. It will default to your current title, but you can create it. And then this is a great feature. You can also see what other users in your industry are using. And so now it's going to pull people from my list of connections and see. I always like to look at these. Okay, so here's Will Simpkins. All right, he is a former colleague of mine who his title is, he's Director of Career Services at John Jay College, but his headline is Innovative Student Affairs and Higher Education Leader, which tells me he's got ambitions to go further places, okay? As opposed to, oh, she's kind of dropped out. All right, well, here's another colleague of mine. She's the Associate Director for Student Programming. So, you know, people do different things with it, but it's helpful to see some samples within your field. Okay, all right. Okay, and then I'll come back to this. Well, yeah, I'll come back to this in a minute. So then this is the summary. Okay, let me expand this. So I have a two-paragraph summary. The goal in my summary, you'll see when we look at my experience, I have sort of a varied background. So I'm positioning myself as a counselor and educator. And so this first paragraph talks about my current work in career development. But then I use the second paragraph to give a nod to some things I've done in the past. I've previously worked in women's leadership development and financial fluency. And so I try and make a connection between that and what I'm currently doing, empowering women. And then I give a nod to where I started out way back in the beginning of my career as a teacher and teacher educator. So again, I'm tying in together. I'm acknowledging that I started out doing something other than career counseling, but I've brought some of those skills forward. Okay, so that's, again, just one way of approaching it. I've seen very long summaries. I've seen bulleted summaries. There's a lot of variations. Okay, so then here's the experience section. Okay, and just to show you how it works when you upload something, you're just filling in this this template. So company name and title. The location is optional. The time period, I believe they force you to do months. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they force you to do months, and then you check off whether you currently work here, and then here's your description section, and that's where you can use. And again, they have this handy see examples feature. Okay, so social media has many pros, many cons, but it is very helpful. All right, so then we're gonna cancel that. Okay, so I've alumni counselor, career counselor, there's my women's leadership. Okay, I was sort of back and forth a little bit. And then I have this nice gap. All right, so if you look closely, I was a teacher when I first graduated, 1984 to 1993, and 93 to 98, and then, 2005. What did I do between 98 and 2005? Could be a big mystery. Most people would probably guess I was out of the workforce raising a child, which is in fact what I did. I could address that in my summary, but I don't really need to anymore. When I first was applying for jobs after coming back from that, I addressed it in my cover letter. So, okay. And then we have languages, we have skills and endorsements. I'll talk about that again in a moment. Ends up looking like a little bar graph. Education, okay. And then the groups I belong to, etc. And then I'll just skim up here while we still have time. I just want to go back. There are multiple sections in LinkedIn. So I clicked on that. So you do not have to fill out all of these, but this is a great opportunity to, you have more space than you do on a resume to fill out. So you can do voluntary and experience and opportunities. You could list your honors and awards, organizations, courses, causes you care about, patents. You can see it just goes on and on. Did you ever publish anything? Do you want to add some personal details, etc.? If you have posts, right? So you can see where there are many things. Again, you don't have to fill out all of these, but you can select them if they help fill out who you are. Okay. All right. So let me go back to this. Okay. And cover some quick do's and don'ts and take as many questions as I can before we run out of time. You want to keep your language clear, concise, and direct. There is more space on LinkedIn, but potential employers are still skimming quickly, so you don't want them to get bogged down. Okay, same thing. You still want to be using keywords and phrases that, but you have to do this sort of collectively. So you want to look for, in the job descriptions generally you've been viewing, what are the buzzwords that seem to come up a lot that are a good, good match for you. Do take advantage of the recommendations feature. I forgot to show you that, but what you can do on LinkedIn is ask people to write you a recommendation. There's a little form for filling it out, and then they send it back to you, and then you choose whether to upload it or not. And the way LinkedIn is set up, they actually have recommendations right next to, they have like a thumbnail of the recommendation right in the area where whatever company or organization it's for. And that, it carries a fair amount of weight. So that's something to think about. And I can talk about that more next week when we delve into LinkedIn a little bit more in detail. Do use the sections for projects, causes, etc. to give a fuller picture. Okay. And we already looked at the example. There are other elements, skills and expertise, recommendations given and received, who your connections are, what groups, who you follow. There's a lot of different parts of this. Okay. And frequently asked questions. Do you have to use LinkedIn? Good question. No, but it has become a widely accepted tool to find and be found, and opting out may slow your job search. It is a really good tool. It's got problems and people have concerns about it, and we can talk about those certainly in questions or in an individual basis. If you do not want to use LinkedIn for some reason, for instance, I had an alumna who had been an actress and who had a stalker, and so she had basically withdrawn from all social media. And other people have other philosophical or privacy reservations, so you don't have to be on LinkedIn, but do think about creating a web-based presence through having your own blog or website, which technically is open to the public, but if people don't have the address, it's not going to come up. So in other words, you can create a blog, create a website, and then just share the contact information for it, on your resume or individually. So it's not as public, and you can have a little bit more control over the information. What are endorsements and how can they be managed? That was that little bar graph thing I mentioned. This allows your contacts to attest to specific skills and expertise you have. I'm not sure how valuable it is. Recommendations are considered more valuable, but if someone endorses you for a skill or expertise you don't want to include in your profile, you can edit that out. I'll add that to my list of things to show you next week, but for instance, I used to work in alumni affairs, and so a lot of my colleagues or former colleagues there were recommending me for event planning, but I'm not really interested in doing event planning anymore, so I took that out of my list. If someone endorses you, it's good etiquette to endorse them back if you feel you can, but you don't have to. Okay, it's up to you. This question I get a lot. If I'm suddenly more active on LinkedIn, can that tip off my manager or colleagues that I'm job hunting? And this is completely true. This can be an issue. So bottom line is you have to be mentally prepared for this and to have an answer. So if somebody says, oh, are you looking for a job? So you can either say, no, I took a LinkedIn workshop and I'm just, want to beef up my profile for professional development purposes, or you can come clean if you're ready to, okay? But one thing you can do to protect from this is to go into your privacy settings and limit who can see your activity broadcasts. So for instance, if you are LinkedIn and have contacts with people at work, you might want to go into your privacy settings and close everything down. You have options. You can sort of make it hard for, and that way activity broadcasts, every time you change something, it doesn't go out to your whole network and let them know. So it can help you be a little bit quieter. So privacy settings menu appears when you hover over your thumbnail in the top right corner. So when you go up to the corner, there's your picture or the little profile, and then privacy settings come in, and then you can go in and sort of, so what I often, when I'm working with people on their LinkedIn profile, we sort of shut down their privacy settings, keep things really quiet while we're working on it. And then once they're actually ready to launch their job search, we open things back up. And then there is not then a flurry of activity broadcast to everybody. Okay. All right, some quick final thoughts, and then I'll take questions. Your resume, cover letters, and LinkedIn profile are an essential first step in your job search or career change. You definitely need to sort of, update them and get them ready to go and get people ready to look at them. The initial preparation can be time consuming, but once you launch your job search, the process of adapting and submitting applications should get faster and easier. So it can feel sort of daunting at the beginning, some of the things I'm talking about, tweaking each resume, tweaking each cover letter, but you'll get the hang of it and you'll see a certain repetitiveness in it. And then, so once you're feeling more comfortable and moving that more onto autopilot, then that frees you up for networking, which is the other really important half of the job search or career shift, and happens to be our topic next week. So that I'll leave you with that teaser and take some questions. Okay. Okay. So let me take this next one. Can I include more detailed information about my volunteer experience if I can relate it to my professional experience as well? Yes, absolutely. So that's one of the reasons why I say you don't need to make a distinction. So for instance, if you you have a full-time job, but you also have a volunteer role that has some overlap, skills-wise or topic-wise or content-wise, then you absolutely can give more detail about that. You can take any volunteer position and put it under experience, and even call it professional experience if in fact it's contributed to your growth as a professional. And our volunteer work that we do often does sort of inform. So just myself as an example, many people do pro bono career counseling or pro bono presentations, and I consider that part of my professional work, even if I'm not getting paid for it. So, okay, all right. Okay, I did not realize there were so many things I could include in LinkedIn. I need to probably add more things. Yeah, I would say start with the basics. I mean, I want everyone to think about their headline, have a good summary, and put their experience and education up there, and then start filling in some of those other things. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by LinkedIn, and so part of what I do when I work with people is to try and make it more manageable. And the single most way of making it more manageable is to not think of it as a one-time event, but to make it part of your regular routine. You're going to pop onto LinkedIn every week, and you're going to maybe write a recommendation for someone or ask for a recommendation, maybe join a new group, maybe post a question to a group. You want to start, maybe add a few contacts. You want to start using LinkedIn on a regular basis when you are job hunting or career changing. But you don't have to do it all at once. How do you address a gap in your professional experience? So what I would do, there's two main ways of doing it. One is to simply leave the gap there. So you saw it on my LinkedIn profile, and that's exactly what I did on my resume, which is there is a gap for me. I did not work outside the home, or however you want to put it, from 1998 to 2005. I was home full-time with my son, and at that time, actually didn't do very much volunteer work either. I did a little bit here or there, but not a ton. So basically, I just have the gap there. The only time I explained it was when I was coming back from the gap. And what I generally did was I used my cover letter to explain it, to say, and keep it very short and succinct. Something like, having been home for 7 years, raising my son, I am eager to return to blah, blah, blah. And I've helped a lot of people sort of phrase that. Sometimes if you've got something to fill in the gap, you simply put it in. So if you've had volunteer experience, or you've been working a couple days a week at a small business, or anything that you've done, if you've been doing a little bit of consulting, paid or unpaid, you can put that in. There's ways of sort of filling in that gap. But yeah, you can either leave the gap and address it in your cover letter, or I do know people who, for instance, for childcare, who will write a description. Um, I have mixed feelings about that. I don't know how well that goes over in the HR world, to say. I had someone once who wrote it out as, CEO of the Jones family and then listed out the key things she did. But I don't know. There's such a mom prejudice out there. Like there's a mom prejudice, a PTA prejudice out there in this context that I don't know. That's tricky. But I'm absolutely happy to help you on an individual basis, look at your particular gap and how we might address it. Okay. Okay. That brings me, I think, to the end of the questions. We've run a little bit of overtime. Some of you have probably dropped out. I'm just looking back to see if there are any questions I didn't get to. I don't believe so. If I didn't see your question, please feel free to shoot me an email at cshin, S-H-I-N, at barnard.edu. Those of you who are still here, thanks for hanging in for an extra 5 minutes. And I'll see some of you next week when we talk about networking, and some of you will email me or call the office for appointments. And I look forward to speaking with you further. Have a great day. Thank you.